A rich man, a CEO, had everything: money, fame, power. But one day in a hospital, a little girl looked up at him and softly asked, "Where can I buy a heart for my mom?" And that one question shattered his entire world. Ben Whittaker had never been a man easily shaken. At 47, he had climbed every mountain a man could in the corporate world. CEO of one of the biggest tech conglomerates in America. He had offices in 6 countries, a penthouse in Manhattan, and a team of assistants who scheduled every second of his life down to his morning espresso. He was efficient, ruthless, respected, but never vulnerable. That changed the moment he stepped into the children's wing of St. Francis Memorial Hospital. It was supposed to be a simple PR visit. Smile for the cameras. Donate a few million. Maybe hold a balloon or two. His team had planned the whole thing down to the color of his tea. A warm burgundy. Trustworthy yet powerful, they said. But nothing in that day's schedule had prepared him for the voice of a child. He had just finished shaking hands with the hospital director when he felt a light tug on his sleeve. He turned. There she was. A little girl, no older than 6, stood in a sunflower, yellow dress, her blonde hair tied in 2 small braids that looked like they'd been redone too many times. Her shoes were worn, her face pale, but her eyes were wide, not scared, not shy, just full of something that silenced even the noise in his own head. "Excuse me, sir," she said softly. Ben lowered himself slightly. "Yes." She looked around, then leaned in a little closer. "Do you know where I can buy a heart?" He blinked. "I'm sorry. A heart," she repeated. "For my mom. The doctors said hers is broken. So, I wanted to get her a new one. I have some money in my piggy bank." Ben froze. The hospital director's voice faded in the background. The cameras were clicking. His assistant whispered something about the next photo op. But none of it reached him. This little girl, this fragile, determined, heartbreakingly innocent child, had just asked a question that punched straight through his chest. He knelt down. "What's your name?" "Emily," she whispered. "My mom's name is Rachel. She's in room 302. The nurse said her heart's not working right. But she doesn't have money for a new one. So, I thought maybe I could buy one. For her birthday. It's tomorrow." Ben swallowed hard. He had closed billion-dollar deals with colder eyes and steadier hands. But right now, he couldn't stop his voice from trembling. "Emily, hearts aren't something we can buy in a store." Her lips trembled. "Why not? If I had more money, could I?" He didn't know what to say. Because the truth was, if money alone could buy time, love, or life, he'd already have enough to fill the world. And yet here was a child, trying to solve the most human of tragedies with a handful of coins. "I don't know," she whispered, sensing his silence. "I thought maybe rich people like you would know where to go." That line hit him harder than any insult ever could. Rich people like him. People who lived in glass towers, drank aged wine, made decisions over contracts and investments. While others begged in hospitals and prayed over pills. Ben stood slowly. "Where's your father, Emily?" She looked down. "He left before I was born. It's just me and mommy." "Who takes care of you?" "She takes care of me. But now I want to take care of her." He stared at her. Then, quietly, he turned to his assistant. "Clear the rest of my schedule." I said. "Clear it." The assistant hesitated. "But we have the gala. And..." Ben didn't even look back. "I'm going to room 302. Inside room 302, the air was thick with the scent of disinfectant and old hope. Machines beeped slowly. A woman lay in the bed, pale and unconscious. Tubes ran from her arms. Her chest moved up and down in shallow rhythm. That was Rachel. Emily's mother. She looked no older than 30. Her face, though tired, held a kind of peace. Emily walked to the side of the bed and took her mother's hand. "Mummy, I found someone rich. Maybe he can help." Ben felt something break in him. A quiet, painful crack in a place he didn't know existed. He didn't say a word, he just stood there. Watching, thinking. About how he had spent millions on suits, watches, property. But never once paused long enough to feel something this real. He asked the nurse for Rachel's chart. Read through her condition. A rare congenital heart defect. No insurance. No donor match yet. She'd been put on a long waiting list. Time wasn't on her side. Ben turned to the doctor. What would it take to get her a heart? The doctor hesitated. "It's complicated. We'd need to fast-track her case. Get her transferred to a transplant center, possibly out of state. That costs. I didn't ask what it costs. Ben cut in. I asked what it takes. The doctor nodded. With the right influence and funding, we could make it happen. Ben looked at Emily. She was still holding her mother's hand, humming a soft lullaby. He didn't know why. But in that moment, he made a decision that would change everything. I want her moved tonight. I'll take care of everything. The doctor blinked. Sir, are you sure? Ben nodded. Just tell me what papers to sign. Emily looked up. Does that mean, you know where to buy a heart? Ben knelt beside her. No, sweetheart. But I know people who can help fix one. And we're going to make sure your mom gets that chance. A tears welled up in her eyes. She didn't say thank you. She just wrapped her small arms around his neck and hugged him. Tightly. As if the weight of her world had finally found a place to rest. And in that hug, Ben felt something he hadn't in years. Not pride, not power, but purpose. That night, Ben didn't go back to the penthouse. He stayed by Rachel's bedside as she was prepped for transfer. He coordinated with surgeons, booked a private jet, and had an elite transplant team on standby at a specialized cardiac center in Boston. And Emily. She fell asleep on a recliner next to her mom, holding a stuffed rabbit and wearing a brave little smile. Ben sat beside her all night. He didn't check emails. He didn't return calls. He just watched them. And in the silence of that hospital room, something changed inside him. This wasn't just charity. It wasn't image building. It was the first real thing he had done in a very long time. And it had started with 7 little words from a girl with braided hair. Where can I buy a heart for my mom? Ben Whittaker hadn't planned to stay the night. He hadn't planned to cancel board meetings, send his driver away, or sit in a dark hospital room with no Wi-Fi and no luxury espresso machine. But by morning, he was still there. The little girl had curled up in a worn recliner, wrapped in a hospital blanket 2 sizes too big, her head resting on a stuffed rabbit named Penny. She hadn't cried. She hadn't begged. She had simply held her mother's hand like she was holding her entire world together. Ben hadn't seen loyalty like that in a long, long time. Not in his boardrooms. Not in the circles he moved in. Not even in the mirror. At 6:12 a.m., Rachel was moved onto the stretcher. The surgical team from Boston had arrived. Top of the line. People who normally worked with billionaires and foreign presidents. They now surrounded a woman who lived paycheck to paycheck. Who had sold her wedding ring just to pay for medication. Ben stood beside Emily as they wheeled Rachel toward the elevator. Where are they taking her? Emily asked, rubbing her eyes. To a place where they can help her better. Ben said gently. She'll be okay. I promise. She looked up at him, blinking slowly. Grown ups say that a lot. But they don't always mean it. Ben knelt. You're right, they don't. But I'm not saying it because I have to. I'm saying it because I'll do everything I can. Emily didn't say anything. She just reached up and held his hand. And just like that, they followed the stretcher down the hallway. The jet was waiting on the tarmac. Ben had made the call in the middle of the night. By morning, his private jet was fueled and cleared for immediate takeoff. As Rachel was lifted aboard by the medical crew, Emily stood on the steps of the aircraft, eyes wide. I've never been on a plane, she whispered. Ben smiled softly. Then today's your first flight. You can sit by the window. Inside, the plane didn't look like a regular jet. It had been converted into a mini flying ICU. Machines beeped, wires snaked around. And a cardiac specialist was already checking Rachel's vitals. Emily looked a little overwhelmed. So Ben guided her to a leather seat near the back. Far enough from the noise but close enough to see her mom. They took off just after sunrise. Emily pressed her face to the window. Eyes darting between clouds and her mom's pale face. She didn't talk much. But when she did, her words were soft, careful, and far too grown up for her age. Do you think she'll like Boston? She asked. Ben looked at her. I think she'll love waking up there, especially if she sees you first. Emily nodded slowly. She always calls me her sunshine. Even when she's tired, I try to smile a lot. Because maybe that helps her stay longer. Ben didn't know what to say to that. So he simply placed a warm hand over hers, and let the silence say the rest. Foot at the Boston Transplant Center, everything moved fast. The moment they landed, Rachel was rushed to pre-op. The transplant center had already located a matching donor heart just hours earlier. A miracle in itself. Ben had pulled strings no one else could, called in favors from senators, paid for emergency transport for the donor organ. Time was everything, and money had finally found its true value. Meanwhile, Emily sat quietly in the hospital's family lounge. A nurse brought her hot chocolate. Another tried to distract her with cartoons. But she wasn't watching. She was just staring at the swinging doors where her mother had gone in. Ben came in an hour later with coffee in one hand, and a small blue backpack in the other. "I stopped by a store," he said softly. "You didn't bring anything from home?" Emily looked at the backpack. It had a tiny bunny on it. "Thank you." He sat down beside her. "You doing okay?" She nodded, though her face was pale. "She said I didn't have to come," she whispered. "Said the hospital would take care of her. But I told her, if she's gonna be brave I will too." Ben's throat tightened. "You're a very brave girl, Emily." She shook her head. "Not really. I'm just scared all the time. But I pretend not to be. For her." He stared at her for a long moment. And then asked the question that had been quietly bothering him since yesterday. "Emily, what would have happened if you hadn't talked to me?" She shrugged. "I would have waited. Maybe someone else rich would walk by. Or, maybe she wouldn't wake up." Ben looked away. There was no escaping the weight of that. He had spent his life building empires. But he had never once considered that a child might wait for a miracle in the hospital hallway, hoping to catch the right man at the right time. 10 hours later, the door finally opened. The surgeon stepped out, peeling off gloves, his expression unreadable. Ben stood first. Emily clutched his arm tightly. "She's stable," the doctor said. "The transplant was successful. She'll need rest and close observation, but she made it." Emily gasped, just once, and then burst into silent tears. No wailing, no noise, just small shaking shoulders. Ben bent down and wrapped his arms around her. And for the first time in decades, his own eyes burned. He hadn't cried at his father's funeral. Not during his divorce. Not even when he lost 40 million in a market crash. But this little girl's trembling relief, it shattered him. Rachel woke up 2 days later. Her voice was weak. Her eyes fluttered open to a quiet room filled with flowers, sunlight, and the faint sound of Emily humming. Ben wasn't there when she first opened her eyes. He was in the hallway, making calls to ensure Rachel's post-op care was covered. He'd already hired a private nurse, covered her bills, and spoken to a lawyer about setting up a trust for Emily. He didn't know why. He just knew he wanted to. When he returned to the room, Rachel was awake, holding her daughter's hand. Ben stopped in the doorway. Their eyes met. Rachel frowned slightly. "Do I know you?" Ben stepped forward. "Not yet. But I know your daughter." Emily turned to her mom. "He helped, Mommy. He's the one I told you about." Rachel looked confused. "Why would a man like you help someone like us?" Ben gave the smallest smile. "Because your daughter reminded me what it means to matter. And because I couldn't walk away." Rachel's lips trembled. Tears spilled over. She mouthed the words. "Thank you." Ben just nodded. "Rest. We'll talk later." He turned to leave, but Emily ran after him and tugged at his hand. "Will you come back tomorrow?" He paused, then slowly knelt down. "Would you like me to?" Emily smiled. "Yes, Penny likes you too." Ben chuckled softly. "Well, tell Penny I'll see her tomorrow." That night Ben didn't go back to New York. He booked a hotel in Boston instead. Not the luxury suite. Just a quiet room. Simple. And he didn't open his laptop. Didn't check the stock market. Didn't answer a single corporate email. Instead, he sat by the window, watching the city lights, and thought about Emily's question again. Where can I buy a heart for my mom? He realized something. He'd spent a lifetime buying things that looked like power. But now, he was learning to value something much greater. Not what money could buy, but what it could save. Ben Whittaker had built his entire life around staying detached. It was the safest way to operate. Business didn't need feelings. Deals didn't need memories. Boardrooms didn't make space for childhood wounds or sleepless nights. But now, somehow, his days were starting with hospital visits instead of earnings calls. He wasn't sure when the shift happened. But it had. Cool 1 week later, Boston Rachel was healing slowly. Her new heart beat strong, but her body needed time. Her spirit even more. Ben came by every morning. At first he brought coffee, then, small things. A warm blanket, new sketch pads for Emily, a scarf for Rachel when the hospital room felt too cold. He never stayed too long, just enough. Emily waited for him now, every morning, without fail. Sitting in the window chair with Penny on her lap. The nurses began to smile when they saw him. Not the way they smiled at a donor. But the way you smile at someone who actually shows up. Rachel watched him quietly. I still don't get it, she said one afternoon, her voice still raspy. You're a billionaire CEO. Why are you here? Ben was sitting by the window, sipping lukewarm hospital coffee. He looked up. I ask myself that too. Rachel gave a weak laugh. And Ben took a breath. I think, maybe because I didn't want to be alone anymore. And somehow, your daughter's voice cut through a lot of noise I didn't know was killing me. Rachel turned to look at Emily, who was coloring quietly in the corner. She's been alone a long time too, she said softly. Ben nodded. She's the bravest person I've ever met. Rachel's lips quivered. She shouldn't have had to be. The words hung in the air. Ben looked away. I know what that's like, he said after a moment. My mother died when I was 10. My father wasn't really there before or after. Rachel looked at him surprised. You? He nodded. You grow up learning to hide it. You smile a certain way. Make the world think you've got it all under control. There was a long pause. Rachel didn't speak. She just reached over, gently placed her hand over his. For the first time in a long while, he didn't pull away. Emily's question changed to one morning. She met him at the hospital entrance and asked, will you come with us when we go home? Ben blinked. What do you mean? Well, Mommy will need help, right? And I can't cook much. And Penny says you're good at lifting things. Ben laughed. Is that so? Emily nodded very seriously. And I like when you're around. It feels less scary. Ben crouched to meet her eye level. Emily, I'll always be around when you need me. But you and your mom are really strong. You can do a lot on your own. She considered that. Can we still call you sometimes? Even if it's not for a heart. Ben's throat tightened. Yes. Anytime. She smiled. Pinky promise. He held out his finger. Pinky promise. The Plinchy Rachel was discharged 10 days later. They didn't go home to their old apartment. Ben had quietly arranged for a fully furnished rental near the hospital, paid for 6 months in advance. No reporters. No publicity. Just a clean place with soft couches and working heat. Rachel objected at first. You've done enough. But Ben was gentle. It's not about enough. It's about what feels right. Let me do this. Eventually, she nodded. Too tired to fight. He drove them there himself. Carried their small bags inside. Watched as Emily ran from room to room, discovering the little gift baskets left on each bed. Rachel stood in the kitchen, staring at the refrigerator. It had food in it. Real food. Tears slipped down her face before she could hide them. Ben didn't say anything. He just leaned against the doorframe and let her cry. Sometimes, the kindest thing you can do is simply not leave. Dinner felt strange, warm, familiar. Emily insisted on setting the table. She folded napkins the wrong way and put spoons in the cup holder. Ben offered to order dinner, but she said, Mommy makes the best spaghetti. I'll help. They cooked. Sort of. Ben mostly watched as Rachel gave instructions from a stool and Emily stirred noodles with the focus of a 5-star chef. Ben set the plates. 3 of them. And when they sat down, him, Rachel, and Emily, Ben felt a sudden ache in his chest. He didn't know why. Until he realized something: he hadn't sat at a real dinner table with other people in years. Not even once. Not without phones, screens, or interruptions. Just food. Voices, laughter. The kind that wasn't forced. He looked around. At the mismatched dishes. At the flickering candle Emily insisted on lighting. At Rachel's soft smile as she sipped water, and he felt it again. Not pride, not power. Belonging. After dinner, they watched cartoons. Ben tried to leave. Said he had calls to make. Emily grabbed his wrist. Just one show. He stayed. She curled up beside him on the couch, head on his arm, Penny tucked under her chin. Rachel sat on the other end, legs curled beneath her. By the time the second episode ended, Emily was asleep. Soft breathing. Tiny hands. Ben carried her to her room. Tucked her in. She stirred once. "You'll come back tomorrow." He nodded. "Of course." She smiled in her sleep. Back in the living room. Rachel had tears in her eyes again. She hasn't slept that easily in weeks. Ben sank into the couch. "She's safe now." Rachel looked at him. Really looked. "You are too." He didn't know what to say to that. Because maybe, for the first time in his life, it was true. Later that night, Ben sat in his car outside their building, staring at the dashboard. He had 38 unread emails. 5 voicemails. A board meeting in New York the next morning. But he didn't move. He just sat there, thinking. Not about profits. Not about markets. But about a little girl who thought he could buy hearts. Oh, and the quiet dinner that filled something inside him he hadn't known was empty. That weekend Ben flew back to New York for 36 hours. The board wanted answers. Why had he disappeared? Why hadn't he responded? Ben listened quietly. Then, when it was his turn to speak, he simply said, "I needed to do something that mattered." They didn't understand. But he didn't care. He flew back to Boston that night. The next morning, when he walked through the door of Rachel's apartment, Emily ran to him. "Penny missed you." Ben laughed. "I missed Penny too." Rachel stood in the kitchen smiling. "Coffee?" she offered. He nodded. "Please." And just like that, he was home again. Not in the penthouse. Not in the office. But here. In this borrowed apartment, with these two people who had no idea how much they'd changed him. Ben Whittaker didn't cry easily. But as he sat on the park bench across from Rachel and Emily, watching them feed ducks with a bag of stale bread, and laugh like life hadn't nearly ended just 2 weeks ago, he felt a tightness in his chest he hadn't expected. It wasn't pain. It was longing. Longing for something he hadn't even realized he'd been living without. Family. Not the blood kind. But the kind you choose. The kind that finds you when you're not looking. Back in New York, people were waiting. The press had caught wind of the anonymous transplant donation. Rumors swirled. Speculation bubbled. His assistant had left him 5 voicemails marked urgent. Shareholders wanted him back. His board had called for an emergency meeting. But Ben hadn't returned. Not yet. Because for the first time in his adult life, there was something more important than quarterly reports and investor calls. A little girl named Emily. A woman named Rachel. And the quiet, peaceful world they had unknowingly built inside that small Boston apartment. That night, Rachel sat across from him at the kitchen table. "You can't keep avoiding it," she said softly. Ben looked up. "What? Your life. Your world. It's waiting." He sipped his coffee. "I know." She tilted her head. "Why haven't you gone back?" Ben looked at the empty chair beside him. Emily had gone to bed early. "I don't want to," he said finally. "I feel more like myself here than I ever have in New York." Rachel folded her arms gently on the table. "That doesn't scare you." "It should," he admitted. "But it doesn't. That's what scares me." She smiled faintly. "You've done a lot for us, Ben. More than anyone could imagine. But sooner or later, you'll have to choose. The empire you built, or the quiet life that snuck up on you." He didn't answer right away. Because she was right. Everything he had ever known was at war with everything he had just begun to feel. Emily asked the harder question the next morning. They were sitting on the floor, building a puzzle of a hot air balloon when she asked, "Will you still come visit after Mommy gets better?" Ben paused, holding a puzzle piece in his hand. "I'd like to," he said. Emily looked up. "Even if you get busy." Ben met her eyes. "Especially if I get busy." She smiled. "Good. Because Penny said we'd be really sad if you forgot us." He tapped her nose. "Tell Penny she's impossible to forget." Rachel's recovery moved quickly. By week 4, she was walking around the apartment. By week 6, she was cleared for light activity. By week 7, the hospital called it a miraculous turnaround. But the looming question never faded. What happens next? Ben had been putting off the call. The call that would mean stepping back into the world he'd ruled for decades. A world where love was weakness, and time with children was reserved for holiday cards. And then, one Tuesday morning, it came. His assistant called and said, "Ben, the board is voting to replace you. You've been gone too long. They're not waiting anymore." He nodded quietly. I understand. She hesitated. You could fight it, I know. Do you want to? Ben looked around the apartment. The sun filtered in through the window. Emily was drawing on the floor. Rachel was humming softly in the kitchen. And his heart, the one that had once been bulletproof, was now full of something he couldn't explain. Peace, no, he said into the phone. Let it go. The resignation made headlines. Whittaker steps down from Empire Tech. Billionaire walks away from fortune. No comment from former CEO. He didn't care. For once, he had nothing to prove. No stock to salvage, no reputation to polish, no title to defend, only a new life to quietly walk toward. 1 month later Ben was at the park again, this time with a picnic blanket and a thermos of cocoa. Emily ran in circles chasing butterflies. Rachel sat beside him, her legs stretched out, face turned toward the breeze. She thinks you're magic, Rachel said softly. Ben chuckled. I'm not. I know. She smiled. That's what makes this better. He glanced at her. You're not scared? That I'm just lost? That this is some midlife crisis dressed in generosity? Rachel turned to him, eyes clear. No. Because people don't fake staying. They fake giving and disappearing. You stayed. That means something. Ben was quiet. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Rachel froze. I'm not proposing, Ben said quickly, laughing nervously. Not today. Maybe not for a while. But I wanted to give you this. He opened it. Inside was a simple gold locket. He handed it to her. She opened it. One side had a photo of Emily, the other, a photo of the three of them, taken at the park by a street vendor. Tears filled Rachel's eyes. Ben, I just wanted you to know, he said, voice low, that no matter where I am, you're not alone. She reached across and squeezed his hand. You aren't either. Eat too. That evening Emily asked him to read her a bedtime story. He sat at the edge of her bed, penny tucked under her arm. Halfway through the story, she asked, do you think my mommy's new heart is happy now? Ben paused. Yes, he said. Very happy. She smiled. Good, because I think mine is too. Ben closed the book. Mine definitely is. Weeks turned into months. Ben moved to Boston. Quietly. No press. No drama. He bought a modest home on a quiet street 2 blocks from Rachel and Emily. He visited every day. He still wore suits sometimes. Still read financial news. Still had the mind of a builder. But his empire now was smaller, more precious. A small girl with a big imagination. A woman with quiet strength. And a life that finally made sense. 1 year later they visited New York as tourists. Rachel strong and glowing. Emily in a yellow dress, laughing as she pointed at tall buildings. Penny still tucked under her arm. They walked past the office Ben once ruled. He looked up once, just once, then kept walking. Emily tugged at his coat. What did you used to do here? Ben smiled. I used to look for something I didn't know I was missing. Emily tilted her head. Did you ever find it? He looked at her. Then at Rachel. Then up at the sky. Yes, he said softly. But not here. Final lines. He had been the man who could buy anything. But it took one little girl asking a question no money could answer. To teach him how to live. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Have you ever experienced something like this? Share your story in the comments below. Or tell us, what did you learn from this video? And most importantly, thank you for giving your precious time.